Now we come to the last in our series called Bel Canto Voices. Today, Patrick O'Connor's talking to the tenor, Denis O'Neill.
Ecco Ridente from Rossini's The Barber of Seville, recorded in 1926 by Tito Schipa. Well, if that isn't bel canto singing, what is? My guest today in the fourth of these Bel Canto Voices programs is the tenor Denis O'Neill. What would you say to that, Denis? You've sung that role, haven't you?
I have, actually. I would say that stands, as you quite rightly put it, as an extremely good example of what bel canto is all about. You have this terrifically beautiful line, magical phrasing, and there's a lot of the man in it. This is not technical museum piece music. This is real singing. He sings the dramatic situation. And yet, of course, the style is extremely intricate, technically. All of that seems to be superbly easy to him. I've always thought about Schipa, but really the voice is slightly dry. It's not a special voice like, let's say, Luciano Pavarotti's or something like that, or Caruso. But he is a great singer. He's a wonderful example of what bel canto is about in another way, that you really don't need a voice. You need to be a singer. You need a technique, and you need a singer's heart, and he certainly got that.
Well, Rossini wrote that part of Almaviva, and indeed the opera was originally called Almaviva for the great Spanish tenor Manuel Garcia. Now, Garcia as the Italians would pronounce it, in a way was the father of the 19th century bel canto technique, and his three children carried on his lessons throughout the 19th century. But how can one define, especially where the tenor voice is concerned, what it is that you've got to have to sing these extraordinarily difficult roles?
Well, this is a great modern problem now, because since Caruso, the attitude and the technique, the method of singing high notes for the tenor voice has changed considerably. The sound that Garcia would have made and the public would have expected would be extremely difficult to that, even amongst the specialists, the excellent specialists that we have today, because they would have used what we would have associated with the sound of a more falsetto sound, one can say. Now, I don't like to use that word because it wasn't falsetto. It's a way of singing high notes that mixes the real voice at its minimum with a great deal of concentrated and firmed up pharyngeal resonance. It's an extremely difficult thing. This is not a radio subject. But they were great extras. Many of them actually were probably more baritonal in the middle than we would expect from our modern counterparts. But that technique has more or less died away now. And so we have a public that is used to hearing the post-Caruso sound, the Gili sound, the modern tenor sound, and they expect that sound in bel canto. And actually it's very, very difficult to achieve because it's far too high.
I think this applies equally, though, to the female voices. When you read about the old singers, a lot of them, in fact, were obviously mezzo-sopranos who had this extension to the top of their voice, but they didn't use the chest voice in the high notes. And one of the greatest was, in fact, Garcia's daughter, Maria Malibran, who was a famous Norma. And when you read about her and what writers said about her at the time, the great dramatic strength, but the inequalities in her voice as well, makes me think that she must have been very much like Maria Callas.
I think so. And very dramatic again, you see. Very individual. And it's worth remembering that a lot of these singers thought nothing at the time of changing the keys of these arias to suit themselves. Malibran, for example, carried tons of material around with, as we well know.
Well, indeed, Bellini rewrote I Puritani for her.
Indeed.
So that she could sing it. But let's hear Callas now in her most famous role as Norma, in this terrifying Act 1 aria, Casta Diva. She has to come straight on and sing this. It must be one of the biggest hurdles in the whole repertory. And I know that she always had great terror with this aria throughout her career, but you don't hear it on her recording. Maria Callas singing Casta Diva from Bellini's Norma, the chorus and orchestra of La Scala Milan, conducted by Tullio Serafin, recorded in 1954. What can one say? They called her La Divina.
Yes, I think that is uniquely beautiful. I mean, here is a supreme example of the individual coming through the music. A great singer. But there are other people who perhaps negotiated those wonderfully difficult, intricate moments just as well, and arguably better. But nobody sings the aria like that.
No, nobody.
It touches your heart in an extremely special, unique way. On listening to that, I always get the feeling, I wish I'd known her. I'd like to talk to her. She appeals to you through the music, and that's, how can I put it, the jam on top of the bread and butter, because the bread and butter is extremely high quality to start with. It's quite uniquely beautiful in my view.
I think this is why Norma was so seldom performed, because it stands or falls on the performance of the title role.
It most certainly does. Yeah.
And unless you've got a singer of that quality who can encompass the whole part, better not to do it at all. Well, Callas, of course, was the Norma of her time, of the 1950s. But in the 1920s and 30s, it was another partly American singer, the Italian-American Rosa Poncell. And I know that when Poncell first appeared in Norma at Covent Garden, Melba, who was in the audience, met her beforehand at the dress rehearsal, I suppose, and said, "My dear, I just have to warn you, they won't applaud after Casta Diva. They never do here. Don't expect it. They wouldn't applaud the Archangel Gabriel." Well, of course, at the end of Casta Diva, there was this fantastic ovation, and everybody said, well, obviously she outsang Gabriel.
Wonderful story.
But I want us now to hear Poncell in the cabaletta to Casta Diva, "A bello a me ritorna." Rosa Poncel singing "A bello a me ritorna" from Bellini's Norma. The Metropolitan Opera Orchestra and Chorus, conducted by Giulio Setti, recorded in 1928. Well, that's a slightly different style, though, isn't it?
It's a very different style. It's a much brighter, higher-placed voice. I mean, of course, it was terrifically successful there from the Coloraturas. Perhaps the extreme high notes weren't as satisfying as they could have been, but it's a terrific performance, very accurate and very spirited, but, as you say, very different indeed.
I wonder if she actually took it as fast as that in the theatre. I mean, they had to get it on one side of a 78
That's a
record.
good point.
So,
That's a very good point. Yeah, but I find that sort of sound terribly thrilling.
It is. And what's amazing, though, also, is that the roles of Norma and of Amina in La Sonnambula were written for the same singer. And nowadays, largely, we separate them. The Aminas tend towards a much lighter voice, the Norma towards the heavier voice. Of course, Callas and Sutherland. And
They do, I think.
some
And perhaps this is very much the influence of Callas personally, because she brought that role to such dramatic life, didn't she? And Norma became very much the title role.
Yeah.
And that quasi-verismo, real acting style, contributes to the sound as well. And I think once Callas did that, it must have been very difficult to do anything else. You know, it's the way Caruso changed so many of my roles. Once he'd sung Carnio, I mean, that was it for the rest of us.
That's it. I think we should hear a singer of today now.
Yes.
And this is, I know, someone you've sung with a great deal and you're very fond of, Edita Gruberova.
Yes, indeed. Yes, we've sung Lucia together many times, and Traviata. In fact, I made my Vienna State Opera debut with Edita in Traviata. She's a wonderful woman and a wonderful singer. I think there are many others, and I don't want anybody else to think badly of what I'm going to say about her, because I think she does stand easily up amongst the great singers of the last 100 years.
Oh
Edita Gruberova, Sovra il Sen from Act 1 of Bellini's La Sonnambula, the Munich Radio Orchestra conducted by Kurt Eichhorn. I love those little diminuendi she does on some of those high notes.
It's a very frightening thing to sing a duet with this lady. And the duet we've sung about most of all is, of course, the first act duet from Lucia di Lammermoor. And it's wonderful to play with a singer like this, in the sense that when she sings Verranno a te su laure, she will do these extraordinarily difficult things, and with a little twinkle in her eye, because you know the next verse is mine. I repeat exactly the same notes. Now you do that and a little bit more. And so one does. It's extraordinary. It's rather like it's a sport, really, which the audience can enjoy. But I mean, obviously it's a musical thing. But there is this physical challenge about bel canto that perhaps doesn't exist in the same way in the later operas, and she is mistress of it. I mean,
she has a lovely smile in her voice. You can hear that
yes,
there. She's a great comedian as well.
It's a terrific talent. I mean, quite unique, I think. I mean, I'll tell you something amusing. When we do that opera in Munich, which was the last time I did it in the Munich Festival with her, the tenor dressing room is on the floor above the stage, so one has to be very careful about getting there on time. It's very easy to be late. She is the only soprano I've ever sung this with when I can comfortably leave for that duet after the applause for her aria has begun and expect to wait in the wings for several minutes before making my entrance. It's quite extraordinary.
So one of the great sopranos of our time, Edita Gruberova. But today we are going to concentrate on the tenor repertory, obviously, and continuing, you were speaking about the role of Edgar in Lucia. This last act aria in Lucia is such a challenge, isn't it? Because the tenor has to follow the mad scene, do something completely different, and, well, you've got to cap it, really.
You've got to cap it. Well, you can try, if you like. I'm not likely to do that. But you have to finish the opera. This is very important. Not just finishing the story. You have to leave the audience with a different experience. It's interesting, of course, that the original mad scene, which dominates the opera itself, not only the last act, really wasn't quite as extensive as we now know it to be. It's been recomposed by many ladies along the decades. But nevertheless, it's an interesting scene because the aria, which is not perhaps the most popular tenor aria ever written, stands for the style. It's very much what the audience of the time would have expected and enjoyed. The cabaletta, of course, I think is one of the most beautiful things he ever wrote for the tenor voice. Difficult for the reasons you've just outlined, that you have to follow this great scene, but difficult technically too, to sing two very contrasting verses of the cabaletta. First, a simple statement, vocal beauty, all that, but then to sing it after having stabbed oneself in your dying moments, and of course was beautifully broken up by Donizetti. There are missing phrases which are taken over by the bass to enhance the quality of the death, the drama of the situation. But then to have to do that in mezza voce, in order to get this pathos, this beautiful sound across the pit, is very, very difficult, particularly at the end of the night. No one does it more charmingly, I think, than Beniamino Gigli.
Che a Dio spiegasti l'ari, o bell'alma innamorata, ti rivolgi a me placata, teco ascenda tuo fedel. O salliva dei mortali, fece a noi sì cruda guerra, se divisi fummo in terra, con sol. Oh, bell'alma innamorata, oh, bell'alma innamorata, aleca la giunga, il nome, il ciel. Io ti seguo, forse nato, a che vai, fare il vaglio, ritorna in te, no, che facesti? Oh, te vengo. Oh, bell'alma, dimmi al chiave, alma tua fede, pensa al cielo, oh, salliva dei mortali.
Pensa al cielo, think of heaven, says Raimondo Delgado. It's not very difficult when you hear singing like that.
Isn't
I
it?
love those individual sobs were so characteristic of him. But they were sincere, you see, quite sincere. Maybe not
absolutely
pure bel
wonderful,
canto,
yes.
but pure
Yeah.
theatre.
It's not altogether the role one associates with Gigli, but he did sing all these bel canto parts early in his career.
You're quite right, and I think it's easy to forget how bel canto his studies must have been. You can hear all through his career, and look how fresh he was at the end of his career. The mixed sound, it's never too beefy, never too driven. It's not the same type of singing as Caruso's was, not at all.
The bass voice we hear there is Ezio Pinza, in fact, and it was recorded in December 1927, Gigli in the finale of Donizetti's Lucia di Lammermoor. Do you know, looking through the catalogue of records available, when you get to the aria from L'Elisir d'Amore, there are more recordings of that, I think, than practically any other piece. It occupies almost a whole page in the
Does it
catalogue.
really?
We
Yeah.
could hear anybody singing it in the history of the gramophone. But you've chosen for us to hear Nikolai Gedda.
Yes.
Now, why?
Well, I think he's a fantastic tenor. He's one of the great tenors of the century, at least. This is a man whose technique is very, very much bel canto formed. Like Gigli, he was able to encompass an enormous number of roles. I mean, Gigli obviously was an Italian specialist, but Nikolai Gedda sings Russian music, Italian music, French music, operetta equally well. Because of his virtuosity and his intellectual ability, I think, besides the technical ability, his ability with the bel canto field is sadly forgotten, rather. I mean, he was a tremendous alma viva, and of course this particular role, great Nemorino, very funny and very Italianate. But I wanted to play this particularly because it is quite individual. It's not like anyone else's, perhaps because it's not an Italian.
Nicolai Gedda singing Una fortiva lagrima from Donizetti's L'Elisir d'Amore, recorded in 1966, the orchestra of the Rome Opera House conducted by Francesco Molinari Pradelli. I think we must say that you were just telling me that you heard him sing that aria at the Royal Opera House a few weeks ago.
I did indeed, just as beautiful as ever. And he chose such difficult arias to sing. He's now 70 years of age. It was an immensely successful evening, let me say that at the outset. But the fact that he chose, for example, to sing that aria, which is so technically difficult, and things like Nadir's aria from the Pearl Fishers, with an extra high C at the end of it, in which he did a Messa di Voce, which is coming from a very, very gentle pianissimo to a forte and back again, at the end of the evening, says it all. That is a bel canto Meister singer, really.
Amazing. Now, I think you yourself have sung in every single one of the operas we're playing extracts from today.
Yes.
And I think La Cenerentola of Rossini, the role of the Prince of Ramiro, was one of your early roles.
It was the first thing I ever sang, and a thing that's sadly now defunct, called Opera for All.
Oh, yes.
It was a terrific starting ground for many, many British singers. And the first role I did indeed sing was that. Alongside, in the same week, the baritone role in La Jolie Fille de Perth by Bizet.
Yes, well, I think perhaps you're the only tenor who's ever sung this role of Ramiro in Cenerentola and the title role in Verdi's Otello.
Perhaps.
But let's hear another really great bel canto specialist of our time, Ugo Bonelli.
Ugo Bonelli is a wonderful character. I mean, he's very loved in the profession. He's a very witty and genial, comical man. Great actor on stage too. And he was a master of this repertoire. I sang with him once in a piece called Il Mondo della Luna at Wexford, where there were two major tenor parts, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I didn't stand much chance with him, I must say.
But we're going to hear him in the Act 2 aria, Ramiro's Act 2 aria from La Cenerentola.
Io giuro, amor, se fosse in grembo a Giove, io la ritroverò. Se fosse in grembo a Giove, io la ritroverò. Se fosse in grembo a Giove, la troverò, ah sì la troverò. Sì, trovarla io giuro, amor mi muore. Se fosse in grembo a Giove, io la ritroverò. Se fosse in grembo a Giove, la troverò, ah sì la troverò. Io la ritroverò, io la ritroverò, 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 la ritroverò.
Ugo Benelli singing Don Ramiro's second act aria from Rossini's La Cenerentola, the orchestra and chorus of the Maggio Musicale, Florence, conducted by Oliviero de Fabritis.
This is a very good example of what the singers in the late 19th century must have sounded like. I mean, those Cs are probably, the high Cs I mean, a little stronger than they would have been, less mixed, less white perhaps than they would have been, but the style is very light, you see, terribly light, but very articulated. He knows how to get the voice across using the words, and the drama's there, the fun is there. You can see Ramiro getting more and more excited, so maybe I got to track her down, let's go and do it now. It's very, very theatrical.
We're coming now to an opera in which you made a tremendous mark yourself, which is Bellini's I Puritani. For me, this is Bellini's greatest opera. It's
I
his
agree.
last opera.
Without a doubt.
But you took part in a recording of I Puritani a little while before
Oh,
you
that's
actually
right.
sang the main
Yeah.
role yourself.
That's right, for EMI, with Montserrat Caballé and the great Alfredo Kraus. I sang the tiny part of Bruno. I think it's got all but 8 lines of recitative. But when Alfredo Kraus sang the great aria, which is a great aria and a very great challenge too, I was standing rather, on his left-hand side. And that remains one of the most interesting and revealing singing lessons I've ever had in my life. The consummate ease with which he delivered this aria is unique in my memory. The quality of his instrument is perhaps, to be totally frank, not the most beautiful. I mean, I don't find it as anything like as beautiful as Gili's or even Gedda's. But it is unique, and I think that's actually very important. It's rather like Callas in that way. There is a dryness about it, and it's individual. It is no one else. It's Alfredo, immediately. For me, to my ear, it's a Spanish sound. And I love Spanish sounds in Italian music. He is a consummate master of technique, there's no question about that. But the actual voice, I once asked him what he felt about the continual references to his voice being rather like Schipa, and he said he found it very, very flattering, but he did think he had a better top.
Anyway, let's hear part of this famous recording conducted by Riccardo Muti, Alfredo Kraus in A Te Cara from Act 1 of Bellini's I Puritani.
Alfredo Kraus singing the aria A Teo Cara from Bellini's I Puritani. The soprano was Montserrat Caballé with the Ambrosian Opera Chorus and the Philharmonia Orchestra conducted by Riccardo Muti. And it ends this programme of Bel Canto Voices in which Patrick O'Connor was talking to the tenor Dennis O'Neill. The producer was Adam Gatehouse.